Yong's theme or topic of wild connectivities. I think as researchers we are always looking for wild connectivities because there is noise in the archive, and sometimes these noise needs to be amplified. And when we're not managing budgets, when we're not managing teams, I think this is our vocation. This is what we are set out to do. And so the artist archive that we've been working on for the past 3 years or so is the archive of this late artist named Ha Baek-chun. He was a Hong Kong-based artist who was knowingly modernist, self-taught. Was a sculptor and printmaker whose kind of aesthetic is very collagey, as you can see, using a lot of local materials such as bamboo and wood. He was also a very prolific photographer of exhibitions, so he went around documenting exhibitions, but he also photographed his own work, as well as himself, as you can see in the lower right corner. But you know, his photographic work is not as well known as his sculptures and all that. And so when he passed away in 2009, the museum in Hong Kong did a retrospective of his 2 years later. And of around 82 works in that exhibition, only 2 of them are photography. And we think it's because it looks like ink. So it got smuggled into the exhibition. But the focus of why we work on this artist's archive is not so much because of his oeuvre, but because of the archive that he amassed single-handedly over 50 years. This is one of the rooms in his former studio, which has now been emptied as part of our project. This is another. And this was how the studio looked maybe perhaps three years ago. And in the past few years, as we are, with the generosity of the family, given the permission to access and to process these materials, what we found is that this archive is a very complex web of practices, of HAs that not only open up us to art history through exhibition documentation, but also offer, in a way, a very different lens of looking at the social political context of Hong Kong. This is one of the possibilities of reading that we would like to see. But I'll show a little what is inside this archive. 50 years worth of exhibition documentation through photography. This is in 1963, and these exhibition documentation was kept in multiple formats as well. So this is an exhibition album, these are contact sheets, and there are also individual prints. The contact sheets from 1982 to 1997, there are around 3,500 of them. So if you do a little bit of the math, it's over 100,000 photographs in those 17 years. And they're organized into albums, hand annotated with invitation cards stuck onto it. And sometimes they're in boxes, and this is one of the boxes that we opened. This is a show from 1977 called First Choice. And Ha documented not only installation shots, but also people who were in it. So there is that possibility of identifying the people, but the question that we are always asking is it worth it to identify these people? What does it actually serve? What kind of history does it facilitate writing if we go to that length? The placement of the materials in this archive also seem to suggest a certain kind of meaning. What you're looking at is negatives of Ha's photography with a year, with an annotation of where he went. So row 120, 1 to 120 in the year of 1989. These photography materials or documentation also leads us outside of Hong Kong, because Ha also traveled. It leads us to a bigger art history. He went to document 10, and he was also traveling to other parts of Asia as well as America. These are just some of the albums that are in places that are very accessible, perhaps suggesting that through their physical location there is an indication of value and use in these materials. Johnson, I warned you that you were in my presentation. This is a younger version of you. But what I wanted to show is actually that each photograph is annotated with numbers of the roll of the film, of the year, and His photographic documentation is as indexical of a record of time that you can get. That in context, this is the order of how photographs were taken. This is the record of time. But what Ha would do is also to choose from a certain role, a certain event that is the most important to him perhaps, and annotate it on the top left corner to see, this is what this role is about. He was also reframing images with pieces of paper, rephotographing books, very often male white artists, as if he was teaching himself. This is also what we're speculating as well. But these photography materials also leads us to a larger web of ephemera that perhaps in this context is also more interesting as it opens up to a social political world that this archive was inhabiting. So in these boxes are many, many different kinds of magazines which were collected from different sources. We think he might have stolen some, but there were also, we are tracing some of the sources where he was buying these magazines. And there are also images of violence, which I'll speak about later on. But he was also photographing himself with his works and also collecting artist portraits, again, as if he was instructing himself to become an artist. And these you can find in many different places across the archive, whether it's in collage books or photography, in slides. And you'll see this man did it. It was a carefully constructed series of self-portraits throughout his lifetime. But what we did not expect to find in his 2,000 volume strong reference library are these collage books, which seems to come from almost a desire to rewrite art history or a desire to rehang spaces, as if these interior spaces were not sufficient, that they needed more. And you can see again the sources come from many different images. There are contemporary sources, there are also art historical sources. All of these materials are being scanned and digitized and shared online. This is a particular collage book called Ink Revelations. And the art historically less acute eye might kind of just see that, okay, this may pass in an Asian ink work, but it's actually a work by the Italian painter Garo Passi. And inside you see more juxtapositions of pretty wild connections of Asian artists with non-Asian artists. Even Africa, there is Africa in there. Ding Yannyong and Matisse. Liu Shouquan on the top left, a Hong Kong painter. But sometimes they just seem to be kind of visual play, manipulating the archival images, playing with the book form as well. And of course, he inserted himself into this alternative art historical canon, if you can read it that way. And I think there's a real liberation in working with the archive like that, and to be kind of be accessing the archive as someone who comes after, and to be able to have this liberty to do different readings. But situating back this archive into a larger political context is this box that we found during the Umbrella Movement on the year 1967 in Hong Kong. 1967 was an important year for Hong Kong because it was the year when pro-China communist groups were trying to start a chapter of the Cultural Revolution in Hong Kong through rioting, through bombing the city with homemade bombs, and they were not successful. And we found this particular magazine or a propaganda leaflet in Ha's archive, and this was actually a publication by one of the pro-leftist newspapers called Who is Guilty of These Atrocities? And at the back, this is actually an image of what was happening at the time in Hong Kong. We found this during the Umbrella Movement when it just happened, and what struck us was the similarity of the images and how they're being manipulated as a reminder that in the end we do get manipulated by the media regime, even though we are trying to involve ourselves in direct action. But what it also reminds us is that there is possibility of rereading these images, even as they are lying dormant in an archive, just performing their primary function, accumulation and storage. When the time comes, there will be a time and a possibility of rereading. There are even more newspaper clippings, just spreads of newspaper from during that year, from 1966 through 1967. Unmanipulated, very different from how Ha was working with his other images. These are just in a box. So what was he trying to do? What function is this serving? He was also collecting other ephemera related to, I guess, around the 60s of that time of that social unrest in different languages. This is from a Chinese magazine. There are ones in Japanese. This is also on the Cultural Revolution. In French, there's also a ton of illustrated London news. So perhaps through collecting, this one person was inhabiting different worlds, and he was also creating different worlds and offering us different ways of rereading and inhabiting this world that I think is very confusing at the moment because of the violence, because of all of the things that are out of our control. And even Africa was sort of in the center of the world at the time. And this is an image from 1969, speculating on what might happen in the next year. And I think this is actually a really powerful image in a way where you see geography and sizes can be manipulated and different imaginations can be spawned. And so now I'll shift gears to kind of how we've been working with this particular archive. This is an image from a small display or an exhibition that we did in a library space on this particular archive, inviting the public to engage with it. And it's called Excessive Enthusiasm, Habitude in the Archive as Practice. In this little exhibition, we showed some of the original materials that we think can open up public conversations. We also reproduced some of the contact sheets that were in a way very carefully selected to make sure that people would be able to identify with it. Certain people will find themselves in it as a way also to just entice certain conversations. And what we also did is, the archives have to be activated collectively, and what better than working with students. So we worked with a group of architecture students from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, asking their teacher, who's the architect we were working with designing the exhibition, to say, look, what would you like to do? And they said, we would like to open a box and to see if we can reconstruct an exhibition. And that's exactly what they did. Apart from Ha's documentation, there were no other references. So there were also other research being done to find the footprint of the building that's no longer there. A lot of photoshopping so that the works actually look the way that they should. And Ha, of course, photographed himself in this exhibition. And this was what the students did as well. So they put him back in. And I think these are elements of surprises that when you loosen your grip, when you let the archive go, it actually comes back with more. And I'll actually skip this, because this is another way of activating archive is to work with artists, and this is an artist project that we've done with Walid Rad, where he transformed some of the archive, some of Ha's collage pages into a three-dimensional kind of little perspective diagram. And this is the little shoeboxes living in a library a few months ago. Another painting. But a little update on that project is what has been happening next. We are fully funded for the next 2 years to process and share and circulate these materials. And one of our kind of modest aspiration is to also build a community around these archival materials, and not necessarily in Hong Kong, but also internationally, to critically engage with it, to think with it, to think through it, because this is an archive that can open up so much more than just Hong Kong history. It's also about archival methodologies. It's all about building communities and collective memories. The condition of the studio was not great. So one very nice July afternoon, we decided that we would move it with a lot of boxes and a lot of people packing. Yes, I'm almost done. These are my colleagues from Asia Art Archive, without whom none of this would happen. This is, in a way, we almost consider this, the move perhaps can be a beginning of a collective practice that emotionally would not crush us, but would actually enable us to do so much more. This is the widow, and this is who still lives across from the Habaichin's former studio. And without her, we wouldn't have any of this. So the studio was actually on the top floor of a walk-up, an old building in Hong Kong, so everything was moved down manually. Yes, the laborers were not happy. We filled a 5.5-ton truck 3 times because there was so much stuff. And we now have rented a project space dedicated to this archive for the next 3 years. And one of the biggest challenges is to find it a permanent home next 3 years, because this needs a proper institution taking care of it, whether it's conservation, excavation, and access for not only scholars, but also the public. You know, like you pack one layer of stuff and then you find another layer of stuff. But this is just to illustrate how much we're doing. And this is the studio as we left it, and where the boxes now live. I think there's a very different materiality to it, but and some people might lament that the archive is different. The archive has lost its charm, but I would like to propose that this is a new beginning. And as I said earlier, it's a possibility of a collective practice that promises something else. And it is through trying and doing and experimenting that we'll be able to find something else. Yeah, and so, you know, like the first box we opened, and then we already found something else. I am always constantly reminded by this conversation I've had with an artist in Hong Kong who said, sometimes it's by doing something finite that you can actually allude to the infinity. And by opening one box, you can actually go through different frames of past and present and futures. And I think for an archive which was gathered together by one man, kind of single-handedly, I think we should almost kind of consciously push against that one person effort and make it into a collective one. Because something of this excessive enthusiasm should be shared, can only be shared and have a different life if it's shared with equally ferocious curiosity. And I'll end it here. Thank you so much.
All through Eastern Europe. He's now in Ljubljana, and he invites other archivists to join his archive, and then they all travel together. He's done 4 countries so far. But what's very interesting is about his gallery exhibition had nothing to do with during this, he uncovered this amazing life that in the 1920s, a man from Nigeria came to Warsaw and tried to be a jazz musician. He loved Poland, learned Polish, married a Polish woman, stopped music, and became a worker. When the Nazis came to power, he joined the Polish resistance as a Pole. He's completely erased from history. So what Radzilewski has done, he's done 12 portraits, large portraits of this man. And this was a house filled with portraits of this black man. They also like in Polish resistance uniform, holding a gun and everything. Now, at the same, a couple of months earlier, the National Museum of Poland has closed for renovation. Now they want new things in it. So they came to the gallery and they bought one of the portraits, but what they said is the only ones we can't show are the ones where he's holding a gun, because it would be too political to show a black man with a gun, even though he was fighting the Nazis. But what's amazing about this is that they bought this huge, beautiful portrait, and when the museum reopens in the spring, this portrait will be in the gallery of Polish heroes. So that's a kind of, wonderful story that we need.
What's the name of the artist?
The artist's name is Karol Radzilewski. I'll write it down for you, and I can show you his website too, because it's amazing. And he's actually written a history of this man too now. Okay, so one of the things that I think that's important here is historiography tells us not only just what happened, but what happens to what happened. And what happens to what happened is what makes future possible, makes our lives possible, and liberates meanings. So what, I just have a couple examples. I'm mostly involved in cinema, and I was just thinking about examples from Korean cinema that remember incorrectly. I don't mean facts, I mean the way they remember is not auspicious, and then there's some that are auspicious. Let me give you one example of a bad memory. It's actually called Lost Memories, 2009 Lost Memories. It's a science fiction based on this novel, I think it was called Searching for My Epitaph. But in that, they posit an alternative history where Japan had won the war, and Korea is a permanent colony of Japan. But then this hero goes back in time and changes everything, so we get the Korea we know now. Now, what I think is wrong with that is that the Korea we know now is a happy ending, right? This hero brought back all the dictatorships, brought back Pak Chung-hee, but this time we're supposed to be happy about it, right? That's a bad memory, right? But one of the things they did right was they showed a whole stream of a series of incidents, historical incidents that lead up to 2009. Some of them are real, and others of them are fake. Now, I compare that to a film from 1980 called Nambugun, the Southern Army. That also begins with a series of historical events that leads up to that point. Of course, those are all true. What's interesting about it is that the fake ones actually stimulate historiographical responses. The real one is meaningless, because all just listing events cannot explain Korean history, right? So, but then just two more examples. My response to this is actually inspired by Professor Kim So-young. I think that Professor Kim is the only person who's given peppermint candy a bad review, which it so desperately deserves. But it's a flashback, a series of flashbacks from the day the guy commits suicide to his innocence. What I think that is horrible about that kind of restructuring of history, it exonerates a criminal that was part of the Gwangju massacre. And that kind of re-editing is a kind of erasure of responsibility that is shocking. And I'm surprised that there are such a handful of people who recognize that. But lastly, this is the one I would like to have the good news. There's one Korean film I think that is the most wonderful way of remembering history. It's a hard film. It's called The Last Witness, also from 1980, Lee Do-young, which is based on a very important novel. That investigates Korean history as a murder mystery, and it actually shows when he's running, this sort of failed detective is going through decayed landscape. He really shows that the unsolved mystery of Korean history is one of the things that causes the kind of despair and incoherence that keeps erupting. It's absolutely brilliant. Then just one last one. It's called The Last Witness. Yeah. And it's been remade, but I want to rush to see the remake. This 1980 is the real one. But then also, even in this sort of glossy, beautifully done film called The Good Lawyer's Wife, Paranam Gato, it's about a marriage failing into decadence. But what's it's really about is like Jeju Massacre and things like that. Remember, the opening scene is them unearthing the bodies, and I think that unearthing the bodies and still remaining silent is a kind of sickness that is all permeating this also. But let me open the floor to questions and responses from the writers.
Who'd like to go first?
I'm so sorry. I didn't have a program. I'm sorry. Professor Hasselman.
Okay. Hello. My name is Sun Hwa, and I'm honored to to comment on the presentation. I just need to some comment on first about the Jane Kaizen's reiteration of the Bisan. I found the presentation of Jane Kaizen very interesting and appealing. Through a multi-channel video installation, reiterations of the descent began in 2011. She reveals that the repressed histories of the Jeju April 3rd resistance and massacre, thus redefining already existing knowledge production system and creating new form of social knowledge. I have no objection to her presentation and I fully agree with her idea. But I just need to supplement her idea. Especially, I come to resonate with her when she focuses on the discrepancies that tend to exist between official state narratives and people's counter memories. She said in her presentation that she was compelled to engage with the legacy of the Jeju April 3rd event as the part of the past, which actively shapes the present, even if through a sense of haunting, since that past has been silenced and repressed. I want to supplement her idea by suggesting that what Jacques Derrida calls inheritance or death in his book Spectres of Marx might be helpful in Jane Kaizen's strong idea. I think Derrida's upshot is very clear. A certain spirit of Marx have remained to haunt the world even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. For Derrida, the object we inherit is not so much knowledge over theoretical understanding as Marx's spirit was practiced, to the extent that Jane Kaizen centers on the importance of haunting the discrepancies between official state narratives and the people's counter memories, and finally how they coexist. I just suggest that what Derrida develops in Spectres of Marx will be helpful. So I just suggest her to develop the idea by thinking of what we need to inherit from the repressed histories of the Jeju April 3rd event. Okay, my next comment is on the Michelle Wang's AAAA and Harvick Chuen's materials documenting 1960s riots. An archive goes beyond the documentary preservation. This is not simply as historical repositories, but as complex processes of knowledge production. As Michelle Wang rightly demonstrated in the case of AAA and the Harvick Chuen's archiving practice, archives contribute not only to collecting the fragmented past, but also to creating the social memory. That is, archives thus refer to artifacts of culture that lead us to think of who we are. Within this context, I think that an archive needs to be conceived not only as documentary preservation, but also as a site of social knowledge production, which redistributes what is known and what is knowable. So within this context, my question is as follows: whether organized by the state, public, or private entities, archives anyway collected materials of the past that are never lived in isolation. Within this context, to which extent do archives play a role in the process of social knowledge production? To put it otherwise, to which extent do archives explicitly or implicitly structure certain kinds of social understanding? And my final question is, what particular forms of social knowledge are specific to archives, including AAA? 다음 두 분한테는 한국말로 좀 질문을 하고 싶습니다. 임지원 선생님한테 좀 질문을 좀 드리고 싶은데요. 선생님의 발표 굉장히 흥미롭게 아주 잘 들었습니다. 특히 각각의 개별적인 어떤 역사적 트라우마가 연결되는 그런 방식들에 관해서 말씀을 해주셨고, 그것이 굉장히 인상적이었습니다. 이제 며칠 전에 최종봉 선생님께서 말씀해 주신 것이기도 한데 그것이 일종의 어떤 커넥션이 가지고 오는 어떤 불안과 공포 때문에 지금 현 어떤 상황 속에서 어떤 그 뭐라 그럴까 디스커넥션의 어떤 상황들이 또 야기되고 있는 어떤 그런 이 아주 변증법적인 복합적인 관계가 있기 때문에 이런 상황에서 커넥션과 디스커넥션의 관계를 어떻게 정립할 것인가의 문제가 좀 굉장히 시급하게 다가온 것 같고요. 그런 차원에서 각각의 개별적인 역사적 트라우마를 재현할 때 이것이 아까 선생님께서 말씀하셨던 것처럼 우리의 트라우마가 더 이참하다, 우리의 트라우마가 더 가혹하다라는 것을 계속해서 증명하는 방식으로 전개되는 것들, 일종의 어떤 민족주의적인 어떤 방식으로 트라우마, 역사적인 트라우마를 재영토하는 어떤 그런 것에 굉장히 강하게 문제를 제기하셨고, 저는 그런 차원에서 이거를 일종의 좀 약간 어떠한 일종의 원리랄까 혹은 원칙이랄까 이런 것에 근거해서 이 특수한 것과 어떻게 보면 이것이 연결되고 있는 어떤 그런 것들을 정립할 수 있는 그런 원칙이나 원리 같은 것들을 우리가 어떻게 상상할 수 있는 것인가, 이런 것에 관해서 조금 답변을 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 그게 있고요. 그 다음에 이용우 선생님 같은 경우에는 네, 그 발표 잘 들었습니다. 그 역사화하고 일종의 집합적 기억을 보존하는 어떤 그런 것으로서 문화 혹은 어떤 K-팝의 역할에 대해서 문제 제기를 하셨고요. 그런 면에서 지금 대중문화의 어떤 그런 현상들 속에서 지금 세월호의 그 사건들을 지금 표상하고 재현하는 어떤 그런 방식들이 형성되고 있는 것을 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그런데 제가 조금 약간 궁금했었던 거는 이 트라우마틱한 이벤트를 상징화하고 역사하는 것의 중요성은 충분히 공감하지만 그것들을 조금 더 좀 세분화해서 조금 분배해서 설명하는 것이 필요하지 않을까라는 생각이 들고요. 기존의 이 지금 이제 대중적인 어떤 표상의 체계 가운데 이 분배가 지금 어떻게 형성이 되고 있는 것인가? 일종의 어떤 일종의 이것도 감각적인 것이라고 할 수 있는 것인데 이 감각적인 것들의 분배가 어떻게 형성이 되고 있는 것이고 지금 그 속에서 지배적인 어떤 경향들은 어떻게 나타나고 있고 지금 마이너한 경향들은 어떻게 또 나타나고 있고 무엇이 가시화되고 있으면서 또 무엇이 비가시화되고 있는지 혹은 가시화와 비가시화 사이의 어떤 그런 관계는 무엇인가에 대해서 조금 더 세분화해서 말씀해 주시면 도움이 될 것 같습니다. 이상입니다.
First, yeah. I have two remarks from all and then my response to all certain point is that your remarks raise certain very important question about the relationship between memory and responsibility. I mean, usually in East Asia, people used to think in terms of certain how can I say, collective guilt. So you're Japanese. If you are Japanese, you should be responsible for what happened in the Second World War, even though you were not born at that time, right? So this is very much violent logic, logically very much violent. I cannot accept that way of thinking. But even though those young Japanese who were born in 1990s, even 1990s, they don't have any responsibility for what happened in the Second World War, but they have a responsibility for remembering what happened, because remembering is an act that is now happening with their involvement, right? So I think that even the post-war generation have a responsibility for remembering what happened or ways of remembering. So this is first point. And second point is involvement. I think this is the point that Hessa Morisuzuki raised in our approach to coming to terms with the past in Japan, means that, let me take an example of Korean case, okay? Some of you are flying Korean Airlines, right? I don't fly Korean Airlines, but anyway, so Korean Airlines and CAL, they had benefited from their involvement in the Vietnamese war. So many Korean, the young generation who were born even after the Vietnamese war, in some sense they are benefiting from the existence of Korean Airlines or Hanjin or something like that, then what kind of relationship should those Koreans who were born in 1980s after the war the keep towards the Hanjin, and if especially if he is an employee at Hanjin or some of us are benefiting from flying Korean Airlines, what kind of responsibility do we have for Hanjin's, involvement in the Vietnamese war? So these two kinds of responsibilities raises really important questions, important points in our attitude for the past. And my response to Sumo, 한국말로 그 원칙은 없는 것 같아요. 그러니까 컨텍스트가 제일 중요할 것 같아요. 물론 내가 히스토리안이라서 그런지 모르겠지만 어떤 하나의 원칙에 맞춰갖고 이렇게 공식으로 이렇게 기억하는 것이 옳은 것이 아니라 컨텍스트에 따라 달라질 것 같아요. 아까 그 나이지리아, 그 아프리카 그 사람으로 폴란드의 그 레지스탕스에게 아마도 아르미아 크라요바라고 불리웠던 그 레지스탕스 조직일 텐데 사실 아르미아 크라요바는 굉장히 레이시스트 그룹이거든요. 그 반유대주의자들도 굉장히 많이 거기 들어가 있는 조직인데 그럼에도 불구하고 이 사람들이 유대인 또 구출을 하는 제고타라는 조직에 가입을 하는데 왜냐하면 유대인을 구하고 싶어서 구하는 게 중요한 게 아니라 폴란드 민족의 명예를 위해서 유대인들을 구하는 굉장히 그런 복합적인 것들이 있는데 결국 메모리에서 우리가 주의해야 될 거는 그와 같은 굉장히 다양한 함의를 가지고 있는 그러한 액션을 어떻게 기억하느냐는 역시 컨텍스트가 중요합니다. 또 하나 예를 든다면 홀로코스트의 유니크니스에 대한 담론 같은 건데 예컨대 1980년대 독일에서 그 히스토리컬 스트라이트라고 불리우는 역사가 논쟁이 벌어졌을 때 독일의 우파들이 홀로코스트를 상대화하려고 합니다. 왜냐하면 스탈린주의의 범죄를 끄집어 올리면서 스탈린주의 볼셰비즘의 위협에 맞서서 나치 독일이 유럽 문명을 말하자면 보호하려고 했다는 나치의 논리를 끄집어들이면서 그러니까 스탈린주의의 범죄도 이게 나치보다 더 많이 죽였다. 홀로코스트 600만밖에 안 죽였는데 예컨대 스탈린주의 때 2천만 죽었다. 그렇다면서 그것을 홀로코스트 상대화하는 맥락에서는 홀로코스트의 유니크니스, 홀로코스트는 독특한 거고 스탈린주의 범죄와 비교해서는 안 된다라는 논의가 설득력이 있지만 예컨대 포스트 콜로니얼한 맥락에서 홀로코스트의 유니크니스를 강조하다 보면 그럼 유럽의 식민주의가 벨기에 식민주의가 콩고에서 1000만을 죽였는데 여러분 홀로코스트의 그 크라임만 중요한 혹은 그것만이 다른 어떤 제노사이드와 비교할 수 없을 정도로 중요하다라는 유니크니스 담론을 얘기하게 되면 사실은 그 유럽 식민주의의 제노사이드라는 큰 맥락 속에 홀로코스트를 위치시키고 그것을 상대화하려는 그 같은 역사적 맥락을 잃어버리게 되는 거죠. 그러니까 똑같은 그 기억하는 방식과 기억하는 문법이 같은 문법인데 어떠한 로케이션에 그것이 놓여지냐에 따라서 역사적 의미와 사회적 의미와 실천적 의미가 달라진다는 것. 그렇기 때문에 이거 이 어떤 수학적 공식을 가지고 이 메모리를 집어넣기보다는 훨씬 더 어렵죠. 사실 공식 하나 외우면 편한데 모든 컨텍스트마다 그때그때의 구체적인 역사적 조건들을 굉장히 면밀히 다 따져봐야지 우리가 상당히 밸런스된 그러한 그 견해를 가질 수 있다. 그 정도가 제 얘기입니다.
Thank you for your comment. We're talking, I mean, yeah, Spectres of Marx has also meant a lot to me in this work, of sort of ongoingly thinking about issues of memory. And I guess particularly, like, I don't remember the quote exactly, but he talks about something about, like, to learn to live with ghosts and to be in conversation with ghosts is also a call for trying to imagine living otherwise and more justly. Not justice in this kind of truth and reconciliation aspect, but more as a kind of aspiration for, I guess, like when I think about it as a kind of like what does an ethical memory or how can we might not achieve it, but we can work towards it and try to listen to ghosts and try to understand, especially, I mean, I guess the way I think about it is kind of like to invoke the ghosts or to try to listen to them also has to do with thinking about like their unrealized aspirations. You know, so that's where the past and the present are in kind of constant active negotiation. If we bring the ghosts into the conversation, it requires a kind of more whole consideration of the memory, you know, because it requires sort of taking the other into the conversation. So I guess, like, I guess the way that it has been meaningful to me in terms of thinking alongside the specters of Marx has been sort of trying to think about in a kind of what does that mean in terms of dealing artistically with an issue like April 3rd, and I guess some of the ways that I have been trying to negotiate that is through this kind of multi-channel installation and trying to like create other forms of narratives that I would hope would allow for a kind of attentive listening beyond sort of like the official narratives. I guess that's how it has been meaningful to me, and to try to continue to think alongside. I mean, it's not like that memory is not final, but it's something that has to be evoked and recalled constantly, sort of like as
So I'm also going to speak in Korean because it's my mother tongue and I'm really like having a hard time for the Japanese. So I think it's better to speak in Korean. So 코멘트 감사드리고요. 집합 기억으로서의 대중문화 그리고 대중문화의 현상들을 세월호를 통해서 바라본다는 것들에 대한 이야기, 그리고 아까 연구에 있어서의 어떤 세분화와 어떤 분배에 대한 말씀을 하셨는데요. 이 연구를 제일 처음에 시작을 했었을 때 세월호가 촉박해 되는 어떤 문화적인 정동의 층위들, 그런 것들을 좀 살펴보고 싶었고, 그리고 그것들이 만들어내는 특정한 어떤 윤리학적 이야기들이 아니라 굉장히 다양한 시장의 문화들의 층위들 안에서 놓여지는, 어떻게 보면 K-팝이라는 가장 대중적인 장르 자체가 어떻게 그 장르 자체를 스스로가 능동적으로 이 폴리티컬한 정치적인 장에 개입하고 노인의 장을 만들어내는가에 대한 문제의 지점들을 좀 설명을 하고 싶었고요. 그리고 방금 말씀하셨던 어떤 세분화와 분배에 대한 설명들, 그리고 이 연구 안에서 이것들이 어떻게 연구적인 한계로 읽혀지는가에 대한 이유는 이 사건 자체가 2014년도에 일어났고, 그거에 대한 문화적인 어떤 레질리언스라든지 레프레젠테이션의 문제들이 지금 한국 사회에서 굉장히 리지드한 정치적인 상황이고, 그것을 문화적으로 표상화시키는 것에 대한 어떤 문화인들의 두려움들, 콜렉티브 어떤 fearness가 있어요. 그리고 그런 것들의 문제 때문에 이 K-팝 안에서 굉장히 highly metaphorical하게 설명이 되었고, 그렇기 때문에 2014년, 2015년, 2016년도에 K-팝 안에서 만들어지고 있는 어떤 다양한 지층들을 보고 싶었는데, 그래서 2014년도 같은 경우에는 가장 직접적인 traumatized audience, 즉 예를 들어서 이 TV를 통해서 그런 트라우마틱 이벤트를 관람하고 있는 다양한 한국 사람들에 대한 얘기, 그게 2014년도에 나왔던 K-팝 포리시스의 어떤 문제들이었고요. 두 번째는 그렇기 때문에 세월호의 가족에 대한 얘기를 그 1 year commemoration period, there is a story about the Passover incidents, family victims, right? So 개인의 기억이나 공유로서의 문제로서의 어떤 K-팝의 문제들, 그리고 제일 마지막에 얘기했던 것은 이게 굉장히 재밌는 다양한 층위가 있어요. 제일 처음에는 우리들, 직접적으로 우리가 그 TV를 보면서 그거를 보고 있는 사람들, 두 번째는 세월호의 가족들, 그리고 제일 마지막 2016년도에 드디어 빅팀의 시선으로 그것을 바라보는 어떤 K-pop 걸리시스가 나왔던 거거든요. 그래서 저는 이러한 어떤 트래젝토리, 문화적인 트래젝토리나 representation의 categorization 자체가 굉장히 재미있는 부분들을 보여주고 있다고 생각해요. 누가 가장 처음으로 발화할 수 있는가에 대한 얘기들, 그리고 이 트라우마에 대한 문제 자체가 제일 처음으로 발화할 수 있던 사람들은 거기에 직접적으로 개입되지 않는 어디언스로 남아있는 한국 집합들이에요. 그리고 그 두 번째로 얘기할 수 있는 것은 1 year commemoration이니까 그 다음에는 그런 어떤 popular resilience나 movement 자체가 굉장히 활발하게 일어났으니까 시민사회 안에서 그렇기 때문에 드디어 victim의 얘기를 할 수 있게 되었고 2015년도에, 그리고 마지막 2016년도에 드디어 그 유령의 시선으로 저 가수들의 목소리로 victim들의 얘기가 드디어 나왔던 거거든요. 그래서 저는 이런 어떤 남한 사회의 집단적인 우울증 자체가 굉장히 자기 자신의 목소리를 거의 한 세기 동안 거절시켜 놓고 굉장히 그런 기억들을 간직하거나 의도적으로 어떤 망각해온 근현대 역사 속에서 이런 레이어들, 그리고 빅팀을 캐러라이징하는 그 방식 자체들이 이미 시스템화됐다고 생각해요. 이미 대중 기억들이나 대중이 그것을 어떤 리인터프리테이션 하는 과정 안에서도. 그래서 그런 것들을 좀 특별하게 얘기를 해보고 싶었습니다. 뮤직비디오에서. 네.
I think it's a very hard question that you asked of us. Thank you very much. I think this is something that we also have to always ask ourselves, and actually in that questioning there is this process of becoming, of actually performing what we want to become. I think one of the very first intention, I guess, behind A is that there is the belief that art is knowledge. Art is a form of knowledge, and therefore the art history, the history of art, and the study of it is worthy. And I think therefore then there is this value then in accessing or amassing and making available resources, materials for people, questions in themselves that through practice we can begin to address them. And so the way that I think we are trying to do is, well, we were founded in year 2000, so we were 16 years, we were a teenager. There's a lot of growing pains. But what we're trying to do is also to develop very context-specific projects that is by no means comprehensive. But I think what you can compensate, that what breadth cannot do, depth can compensate. And I think in a certain way, if you go deep enough on a subject, and there will be other connectivities that actually allow you to see not only yourself but other people. And so I'm trying to think of maybe one project as an example, which is actually not an archiving project, but a bibliography project that my colleagues in India have been doing. And India is also a modern construct, right? We cannot divorce ourselves from modernity, and especially if you're looking at recent art, modernity and colonialism and post-colonialism is something that you are dealing with or living within, kind of a priori, or kind of in the very, very beginning. And so in this bibliography project, what my colleagues had done over a year and a half is to run this kind of a marathon race of researchers going through libraries in regions, in different regions, because this is a bibliography of modern and contemporary art in India at the time, and now it's expanded to South Asia because languages also travel, of modern and contemporary art in South Asia in the past 100 years in 14 languages. So what they did was to have these regional researchers going through regional libraries, actually then going through library catalogs, to amass this bibliography. And then we realized actually a bibliography is perhaps not alive enough, and what you can actually make it live is by doing university workshops. And that again, in a way removes the organization away from what an archive is, but I think the whole point is also to rethink what an archive is and what an archive can do, apart from serving only academics and curators. What can it do in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of knowledge production infrastructure, as well as community that will use it.
So we're sort of out of time, but I think that we should have at least one or two questions.
So I just wanted to comment on Professor Lee's statement, or the connection he made, which I found very interesting. Of course, Du Bois's travel to Poland and what he wrote about later on. And I mean, because he laments the situation of the world. And then he says what he draws from that actually is not very much about what he calls the problem of the Jews, but to him the Negro problem. So he kind of makes an entanglement, which I find very interesting, because there are technologies of certain things, So the technology of the Holocaust is a similar technology that was used in the kind of extermination of the Armenians in Turkey. But it's also the same kind of technology that was used by the Germans on the Hereros and the Namas in Namibia, So there's a continuity in certain things, So I really find these entanglements, these kind of connections you made very interesting, and I think that's how we should look at the world. Then a statement also on Professor Lee's presentation, which I also found very interesting. Again, so how certain incidents influence pop culture. But then, what I even find more interesting, and it's something I've been working on in the past years, is how then culture then turns to impact or leave an impact in subjectivities and space. So we listening to that sound, what does that do to us? So it is this cycle, So I find that maybe that should be explored even more. Not only, how this flows into culture, but how it reverberates, and this comes back to us, And then last thing, Michelle, we talked about that yesterday. Again, the performativity of the archive, which is something we all have to continue thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Perhaps I think I can add just one more small anecdote regarding Du Bois in Poland. Actually, he visited Poland twice. At the turn of 20th century, when he was a doctoral student in Berlin, he visited Poland and the Galicia, it's a Polish Galicia. And then at the time, he left a very interesting this memory that there was no taxi in the small town in Galicia, so he took the cart driver, right? And so, I need a hotel accommodation. And then cart driver said, I know one hotel that is run by one of your people. And he led Du Bois to the hotel run by a Jew in Galicia. So this is really interesting anecdote, and I think that this means that his second visit to Warsaw Ghetto is also related with these sort of things, right? There's also foreigners and strangers in those East European small towns. But so also, this, I think that the German, even Nazi German occupation policies in the Poland, it's a typical colonial policy in Africa. For example, it was not allowed for Poles to have cameras and typewriters. It was not allowed for Poles to go to theaters and kinos. These guys, savages, these Slavs. And Hitler explicitly wrote that the demarcation line between Asia and Europe is the boundary when the Germandom ends and Slavdom begins. So Slavs has been always Asians or sort of natives by Germans, especially by the Nazi ideologues. So I mean that even the post-colonial perspective is not just about the Europe and the non-European countries' relations, but also Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Yeah. So post-colonial approach in this sense, even in the European studies, we need post-colonial perspective.
Thank you for thank you for the wonderful questions. Like I'd like to focus this on the K-pop because K-pop is actually like when it shifted to the global markets and it like making a kind of like very active various questions like in relation to ethical or political, even like a strategic questions in relation to the what is this specific meaning, cultural syndromes and symptoms, which is composed of specific domains of the real or imagined, or sometimes very much like hybrid or cross-fertilized cultural fields in relation to the K-pop, movement. So in this representation, I'd like to focus on this kind of cultural reinterpretation of these specific traumatic events in relation to the sulfur incidents, because the most of the people during the times, the audiences, especially the Koreans, there are several layers of reinterpreting this specific culture,